Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Lauren Musica Show, your favorite update in the battle for life, family, and freedom. Thank you so much again for being with me. What a treat. I'm Lauren Musica, attorney and human rights advocate, and I serve as president and CEO of Sidewalk Advocates for Life, the nation's largest peaceful sidewalk outreach organization. I'm going to start off this show getting straight to the point. It makes my blood boil. There is a mountain of misinformation that is circulating the culture and the country when it comes to state pro-life laws. And that misinformation is actually putting lives at risk. The abortion lobby, I want everybody to hear this. The abortion lobby is pushing a lie that pro-life laws are killing women. So much that it's even moving people of faith and conscience when they enter the voting booth to vote for abortion until the point of birth in some cases, worried that, for example, they won't have access to emergency early delivery, ethical ectopic pregnancy treatment, or miscarriage management, which is ridiculous because this is available to every one of our 50 states in the United States of America. It did not change when Roe was overturned a couple years ago with the advent of the Dobbs decision. So, what is going on? How do we combat this misinformation? I've invited one of the top medical experts in our nation, one of the most well-respected doctors in our nation, to unpack this. And that is Dr. Christina Francis, the CEO of the American Association of Pro-Life Obstetricians and Gynecologists, otherwise known as AAPLOG. So let me go ahead and quickly introduce her and let's have a discussion. Dr. Christina Francis is a board-certified obstetrician gynecologist and the CEO of the American Association of Pro-Life Obstetricians and Gynecologists, again, otherwise known as AAPLOG. Dr. Francis currently practices as an obstetric hospitalist in Indiana, serving pregnant women in a hospital setting. She is also an internationally acclaimed advocate for life-affirming medicine whose writing has been featured in outlets such as USA Today, The Hill, and The Wall Street Journal. So let's go ahead and dive right in. Let's welcome to the program, Dr. Christina Francis. Hello, Dr. Francis. Thank you so much for being with us.
Hello, Lauren. It's great to be here with you. I'm really excited to jump into this topic today.
Yeah, it's so important. So let's dive right in. I want to back up a little bit and allow our audience to get to know you a little bit more. How did you decide that practicing medicine was for you? And what do you love most about being a doctor?
Oh, that's such a great question. I feel so blessed that I am doing something that I couldn't imagine doing anything else with my life. So
Yeah.
I'm so glad that I went into medicine. I actually did not decide on medicine until
Hmm.
my last year of high school. I had been planning on being a marine biologist for some reason. And I think that, I had gone to SeaWorld and just fell in love with it or something. So,
Love it.
I was on a college visit and met with some biology professors, and through talking to them, realized that maybe marine biology was not in my future. And so then I started thinking, well, what do I really like? I really enjoy sciences and just sort of the scientific process, but I also really love people and helping
Yeah.
people. I had grown up in an inner city ministry that my parents ran. And so they had really instilled in me the importance of caring for others, caring
Mm.
for those who were maybe neglected by society. And I had started to sort of dabble in missions work. And so all of that just sort of came together, and medicine just made sense then to do. And like I said, I can't imagine doing anything different. And the thing that drew me to obstetrics, though, specifically to OBGYN, was my second year of medical school. I was shadowing a family physician and went with him to watch a delivery. It was the first time
Mm.
I'd seen a delivery, as an adult. I'd seen my sister be born, but it was the first time I'd seen a delivery as an adult, and I just cried. I thought it was the most
Wow.
beautiful thing that I had ever witnessed. Such a miracle to watch the process of birth, especially when it goes well.
Mm.
And there was this older, sort of seasoned labor and delivery nurse that was waiting over at the warmer to accept the baby, and she saw me tearing up, and she leaned over to me and she said, "Oh, honey, if this makes you cry, you need to do this for a living." And I
Oh,
wish I could go back and find her because she changed, the course of my life because I really had not been considering OBGYN before that. And she was right.
yeah.
It was exactly what I needed to do. And it is such a honor and a
Wow.
privilege to take care of two patients is what we always say when we're taking care of pregnant women. We have two patients that we're taking
Yeah.
care of, and that's an exciting challenge with each and every patient that I see.
Mm. What a beautiful story. Like so many people say, well, I wanted to make good money. And, I love the challenge of being a doctor, which is great too. None of those things are wrong. Right. But
Sure,
for
sure.
you to say, hey, like this went deeper. This is about helping human beings and serving them in a really special way. Right. And the beauty of creation. That's so
Yeah.
beautiful. So good. You already alluded to this. Why is it important to you and many of your colleagues to practice what you call life affirming medicine? And what does that actually look like in your day to day work?
Yeah. Well, it's so crazy to me actually that we have to have an organization that is called the American Association of Pro-Life OBGYNs. Like it's kind of
Mm,
amazing to me that there are OBGYNs that are not pro-life, right?
yeah.
Because I think for so many people who go into the field of OBGYN, not everyone certainly, but I think the vast majority, at least in my experience, go into it because they love the obstetric side of it. They love taking care of pregnant women and doing deliveries. And just even our oath that we take as physicians, or at least the oath that everyone used to take, the Hippocratic Oath. Now, it's not being given in many medical schools anymore, but
Mm,
the original Hippocratic Oath
wow.
actually expressly forbid abortion. And the reason
Yeah.
for that is, and I'll just go into this a little bit because maybe people watching this aren't aware of where the Hippocratic Oath came from. So in Hippocrates' time, the people that were providing medical care were essentially called healers, but those same healers would also kill someone with poison if they were basically killers for hire. And so it kind of depended
Mm.
on who paid them more. So if somebody paid them more to kill you then you could pay them to heal you, then you might end up dead. And
Wow.
Hippocrates and those that he worked with recognized that killing should have no place in the practice of medicine, that the
Mm.
practice of medicine had a different purpose. And now we say that the purpose of medicine is health, healing, and wholeness. And so death doesn't have
Oh.
any part of that at all. And so, Hippocrates recognized that. And interestingly, if you read some of the work of sociologists who have researched him, he wasn't even against abortion, actually. Like he still thought it was fine for that to be done, but that it shouldn't be the profession of medicine doing it, that it should be somebody else, that it should be outside of the profession of medicine because of what the purpose
Wow.
of medicine was. And so I think that's just a really good illustration of why abortion is so antithetical to who we are as physicians. We are meant to be healers. We're meant to help, make our patients whole again if their health is broken in some way, or to ensure that their health remains whole, throughout their pregnancy, throughout their development in utero. And so abortion is really antithetical to that. And it has destroyed our profession, honestly, in so many ways. I think it's at the heart of, when you dehumanize one of your patients and you say that you could intentionally end the life of one of your patients, for a matter of convenience or a non-emergent reason, um, that really impacts so much in the ethics of how we practice medicine, how we view our patients, how we view ourselves. I could go on and on about that, but we've come now to this place where um, many physicians, in fact, I hate the use of the word provider for physicians because it really sort of, I think, invokes this notion that I, as a physician, am here to simply provide whatever it is that my patient asks of me. A very transactional relationship. And in fact,
Yeah.
it shouldn't be transactional. I'm here as a medical expert, yes, to work with my patient, but also to bring in this sense of medical expertise and let me help you make choices that are going to improve your health, improve the health of your child, that sort of thing. And so, and at the base of that, I think, is this devaluing of certain patients' lives. And certainly our preborn patients have been the most devalued, I think, of any patient population that we serve. And so that's what abortion focused medicine looks like, which again I think is antithetical to the practice of obstetrics. What life affirming care looks like is it says, I've got you and I've got your baby. Thankfully, most times your health and your baby's health go hand in hand. And when I maximize your health, that means baby's health is maximized, and vice versa. Now, sometimes there are situations where those things are a bit at odds, where maybe
Yeah.
baby's not doing so well or mom's not doing so well. And we have to sort of tweak things, maybe at the expense of the other, to improve, the health of one. But a life affirming medical care looks like that we're always seeking to maximize the health of both of them as much as possible. And if we're asking one to sort of pay a price to improve the health of the other, that we're doing that in a way that respects both of their dignities. So,
Mm.
one example of that might be if a mom has something called preeclampsia, which is high blood pressure in pregnancy, can lead to very severe consequences for mom. The only cure for it is delivery. But
Yeah.
sometimes if a mom has severe preeclampsia at 27 weeks, sure, the safest thing, the best thing for mom would be an immediate delivery because that would cure her preeclampsia. However, we know that puts baby at really extreme risk at that gestational age. So that's when we talk with the patient. We say, you know what? We're going to ask you if you're okay taking this risk. We're going to monitor you really closely, but we're doing that for the benefit of your child to hopefully get your child farther along so that he or she can do better. Every mom that I've ever talked to says, yes, absolutely. I want to do
Mhm.
that for my baby. But sometimes then we get into a situation where it becomes really too unsafe for mom to keep on that track. And then at that point, we have to intervene. But life affirming care, again, is always looking at how do I maximize the gold standard is maximizing the health of both mom and baby, and we get better outcomes for both when we do that. Versus non-life affirming medicine is always only looking at mom, and not always taking into account baby. And not only does that obviously have a negative impact on baby, especially if it means an abortion where baby's life is intentionally ended, but oftentimes it has a negative impact on mom's health as well when we don't practice life affirming medicine. So that's what we are at APLOG. I mean, that's how all of us have always practiced, but it's also the ethic that we are trying to restore to the practice of medicine, specifically in the field of OBGYN.
So good. It's that beautiful phrase, love them both, treat them
Yeah.
both. I love how you talk about both of them as patients, right? Because it does seem like the medical field is now talking about that baby in a dehumanizing way, at least either until mom makes the decision that that becomes a person or somehow that child in their eyes captures value, right? And
Right.
so I love from the beginning you say these are two human beings, two human patients. We love them both, we treat them both. When you were talking earlier, I thought a lot about how Planned Parenthood loves to say abortion is healthcare. And then we kind of respond to that saying, well, if your healthcare is killing people, you're probably doing it wrong, right?
Right. Right.
So,
100%.
really something to think about. And I love that this is an ethic that is as old as medicine itself.
Yeah.
And can we bring the practice of medicine back to what it originally intended to be?
Yeah.
So powerful. Here in post Roe v. Wade America, we've got a lot of, just to get to the nitty gritty, we've got a lot of misinformation floating around about the pro life states. I'm in one, I'm in the great state of Texas. We protect life at conception, and it's from its earliest moments. And then pro life laws that outlawing abortion is putting women at risk. What would you say to that, Dr. Francis?
Well, the simple answer is it's absolutely not true.
Yeah.
These laws, excuse me, these laws are completely consistent with how the vast majority of OBGYNs practice.
Mm,
And it's how I've practiced my entire career for the 2 decades that I've been in practice. And I am not letting women die right and left simply because I won't intervene to help them.
mm,
The only, I think a really interesting point to point out is there were 3 surveys that were done in about the 10 years or so leading up to the Dobbs decision. And they asked practicing OBGYNs, do you perform induced abortions as part of your practice? That's it. They didn't say, oh, we're not talking about miscarriages. We're not talking about ectopic pregnancies. They just said, do you do induced abortions? The doctors understood what induced abortion meant when they were asked that question.
Yeah.
76 to 93% of them said they do not perform induced abortions. So
There
the
you go.
vast majority of OBGYNs are not doing induced abortions. I guarantee you, all of those ones that said no were treating miscarriages, they were treating ectopic pregnancies, they were intervening when women had medical emergencies. But they understood before Dobbs, before this intentional confusion was introduced by the abortion lobby, they understood that those things are not induced abortion. So,
Right.
first off, they all understood before Dobbs that those weren't induced abortions. They should understand after Dobbs that these are not induced abortions. Second, that's how we know that these pro-life laws are not killing women, because those pro-life laws are consistent with how those 76 to 93% of OBGYNs were practicing. And so I've
Good
said
point.
since the Dobbs decision, the only people's practices that needed to change after state laws like Texas's or mine in Indiana went into effect were those doctors that were doing elective induced abortions. They had to
Mm.
stop doing them. Everybody else could keep practicing the same. In fact, my hospital in Indiana, the exact guidance that I received after our law went into effect in 2022 was nothing changes. We keep practicing
Yeah.
exactly how we always have, because my hospital doesn't do elective abortions. And so, that's the kind of guidance that needs to be given to physicians in pro-life states now. Unfortunately, as you said, there's a lot of confusion because the abortion lobby and their friends in many of the medical societies and organizations like the American College of OBGYNs are intentionally confusing doctors and the public so that people will be opposed to these laws, because they know people aren't going to be opposed to the laws just based on elective abortion, because a lot of people are opposed to elective abortion. But you fearmonger
Mhm.
and you tell people that women are going to die because they can't get the help that they need, and then people are going to support these radical abortion amendments or want to overturn the pro-life laws that have been put into place. So it really is maddening and so frustrating, like you said, because ultimately who's paying the price are women that are
Yeah.
maybe care is being delayed that they actually need, and it's needlessly delayed. It does not need to be delayed.
See, that's what I keep coming back to is I think about the woman whose blood pressure is skyrocketing or something
Right.
like that, right? And maybe she's afraid to go to her local Texas hospital and get the care that she needs because she's heard that, oh, they can't, do an abortion, which emergency early delivery is not an abortion, right?
Right.
Like we've
Right.
said before, I know
Absolutely.
AAPLOG has said before, sometimes we need to separate mother and child for the good of both, right?
Mhm. Yep.
Can you speak to that a little bit? Like, how do you see this scaring women, potentially hurting women, and what is the remedy here?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one, I think we need to be very clear on definitions. So,
Mm,
an induced abortion has one intent, and that intent is to end the life of that preborn child.
yeah,
And, that's not even just us pro lifers saying that. That's actually the definition per the CDC, is that
right.
an induced abortion is an intervention that does not intend to result in a live birth. So
Mm,
even the CDC, and the CDC goes on to say this does not include miscarriage, ectopic pregnancy care. Like, the CDC acknowledges that that's what an induced abortion is.
yep.
And the state laws are very clear as well, that those laws do not apply in medical emergencies for life of the mother. They don't apply in cases of miscarriage or ectopic pregnancy treatment. And so that's very
Mm,
important for doctors to understand, one. The other is that doctors and the general public need to understand that when we intervene to save the life of a mother, you are exactly correct. At APLOG, we like to use the phrase because it's accurate. It describes what's happening, that we might
yeah.
need to do a maternal fetal separation, meaning we have to separate mom and baby. If that's after the point where baby can survive outside of mom, it's a no-brainer. You deliver her, you take care of mom, you take care of baby. If it's before the point of viability, we still may need to separate them. Those are very difficult circumstances. You know that baby very likely is not going to survive for very long after birth.
Right.
However, you can often, almost always, do that separation in a way that respects the bodily integrity of that baby and gives mom and
Mm,
dad an intact child to hold and to grieve, which is an important part of healing for them.
yeah.
And so I just think we can't say it enough for people to understand these laws are not radical. They are consistent with the way that the vast majority of doctors have practiced in this country their entire careers. And we are not seeing women die right and left because we're not intervening. Where
Yeah.
women are dying, and we've seen some reports of this, is when doctors delay giving them the care that they legally could give them. And I think that's happening for a few reasons. One, doctors are people just like everybody else. They listen to the mainstream media, they scroll through social media, things like that. So they're hearing the lies. And then sometimes hospital attorneys are not giving appropriate guidance. They're telling doctors they need to delay or wait till a patient is sicker. That is not true. No state law in the country requires that a patient be actively dying before you intervene. They just have to have what you foresee in your reasonable medical judgment as a life-threatening complication of their pregnancy. It doesn't mean they have to be knocking on death's door. And medical organizations have to be giving doctors accurate guidance. So ACOG, as I said before, they just started a new campaign called Blame the Bans, where they are telling doctors that if they practice in a state with an abortion, quote unquote, ban, that they can't intervene until their patient is actively dying.
Oh,
ACOG is endangering women's lives. And so APLOG has stepped into that gap. We have a new medical education video series with a video on this for education for physicians. It includes a high-risk OB doctor and an attorney explaining how and why they can intervene immediately.
yeah, absolutely. Unbelievable and so necessary. I'm so glad that you all are doing that. Let's go ahead and take maybe one of these cases, right? I wish we had a longer show to unpack, the 4 or 5 that have been in the news lately. But if you were to take one of these popular cases of a pregnant woman who unfortunately passed away because she didn't receive the medical care that she deserved, um, can you unpack that for us a little bit? And then what was the key kind of misunderstanding in that case, and how is it instructive for the rest of these cases that have been in the news as of late?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's, as you said, there's many cases that I could choose from. One of which was in Texas, didn't result in the woman's death, but many people might have heard of the Amanda Zarowski case, and the
Mm.
Texas Supreme Court actually ruled that her doctors could have intervened under Texas's law, but didn't. So they actually performed medical malpractice. So
Wow.
that was one case, but thankfully she survived, but she had a really horrible experience. I
Mm.
think probably the case that most people had heard of, this came out not long before the election, was the Amber Thurman case. Amber Thurman was a young mother in Georgia who wanted to go to nursing school, had a young son, was pregnant with twins, and chose to have an abortion via the abortion drugs. Went to North Carolina to get those drugs, and then came back to Georgia. Again, 9 weeks pregnant with twins. Took the mifepristone when she was in Georgia, or I'm sorry, in North Carolina. Took the second drug when she came back to Georgia. And then a few days later developed really heavy bleeding, severe abdominal
Mhm.
pain. She was having trouble breathing. She was vomiting and then started vomiting blood, had a fever, went into the emergency room. This is all per the ProPublica article, but they detailed it relatively well, actually. And presented with what I've said this multiple times since this story broke. A first year intern could have diagnosed her as septic when she presented. And knowing her history of having just taken the abortion drugs, most likely with retained, parts of her babies inside of her that she hadn't passed everything. And sure enough, that's what an ultrasound confirmed. Again, a first year OB resident would know the treatment for that. It is immediate to IV antibiotics and an immediate DNC to empty her uterus. That is the only way you're going to make her better. They sat
Yeah.
on her. They didn't start antibiotics for 3 hours. They did not do a DNC for 20 hours. They waited to do the DNC till after she was in the ICU on medicines to keep her blood pressure up and starting to go into multi-system organ failure. And Amber died on the operating table, unfortunately. This is a gross case of medical malpractice. Now, it should be noted actually that at least to my knowledge, neither the doctor nor the hospital are trying to blame this on Georgia's abortion law, but abortion advocates have been blaming it on Georgia's abortion law and saying that DNCs are outlawed, and that's why the doctors didn't intervene. DNCs, the procedure to empty a woman's uterus, DNCs are not outlawed anywhere in this country. A
Yeah.
DNC being used for an elective abortion is outlawed in some places in this country. But Amber, when she showed up to the hospital, her babies were already gone. They didn't have heartbeats, and she was in a life-threatening emergency. So for both of those reasons, even if the doctor had hesitated because of Georgia's law, she would have, she wouldn't have fallen under Georgia's law. They could have intervened. So, and in all of that discussion, all of the abortion advocates and the mainstream media are ignoring what the actual cause of her death was, which was the abortion drugs that led to those
Right.
complications.
Yep.
And thankfully, I heard recently that Amber's family is suing the hospital and the doctors for malpractice, as they should, because she should have had interventions immediately. So, but these stories, and for people who maybe don't fully understand and they hear that, I can't blame them for thinking, well, if that's what Georgia's law did, then of course I would be opposed to that. I would be opposed to it if Georgia's law actually had prevented a doctor from intervening in that situation. But it
Golly.
doesn't. And there's not a single state law in the country that does.
Unbelievable. I mean, it just seems to me like the obvious answer here, and maybe it's easier for me to unpack this as an attorney, right? But I look back to the danger of chemical abortion for
Yeah.
putting her in this situation in the first place. Can you take a moment to talk about some of the risks of chemical abortion and why this really is a dangerous regimen for women?
Yeah, it is very dangerous. And the risks for her were likely heightened because of having twins, just because there's more
Mm,
blood flow going to her uterus. There's more baby in there because she's pregnant with twins. So there's more that has to be expelled from her uterus than if she just had one baby. But in
yeah.
general, we know that the risks involved with these drugs are hemorrhage or very heavy bleeding, severe pain, infection. They are known to raise the risk of an atypical kind of sepsis.
Mm,
Um, and also retain tissue where women don't pass everything. And the farther along they are in their pregnancy, and also if they have twins, the higher their risk of a need for a surgical completion of their abortion. And the way these are being dispensed now, I mean, Amber actually went to an abortion facility and got the drugs. But now there was another death around the same time, Candy Miller. She got them online with no medical supervision whatsoever. And also, the FDA used to, when they approved these drugs, they used to require follow up visits because they recognized that the risk of complications was high enough that women needed to see a physician in follow up so that they could receive timely care if they were suffering any of these complications. The FDA removed that follow up visit requirement. Now, they say, well, we're not telling doctors they can't provide follow up visits, but it's pretty obvious when it's not required, abortionists aren't doing it. And then
yeah.
women are left to be abandoned to their local emergency rooms to be treated by who knows who. And obviously, Amber, when she showed up to this hospital in Georgia, was not treated by a competent physician to take care of her complication. And then women are the ones paying the price. And yet they're being told that these drugs are as safe as Tylenol. It's just like having a heavy period. That's it. It is a huge lie, and women are being damaged. Sorry, I get really worked up about this because it makes me
Yeah,
so mad.
please. Yeah.
Because women are being lied to and they're being
Yeah.
told that this is an easy fix.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Is it fair to say that if this were any other drug on the market with its rate of complication and what it's done to our American women, FDA might have pulled it? I mean, I look at this and all of these safeguards have been dropped around this drug. It pouring across state borders. People can order it through the mail without an examination. I've heard too that, if you have an ectopic pregnancy and you take the abortion pill regimen, like you are at risk of some serious complications, right? Can you speak to that for a moment?
Yes, no, you're absolutely right. I think, well, I'm going to start with your last point. If a woman has an ectopic pregnancy that's not diagnosed, these drugs do not treat that. So it
Mm.
will continue to grow and it can rupture her tube and cause life-threatening bleeding. The real danger there is women are told when they take these drugs for a chemical abortion that the symptoms they're going to experience are abdominal pain and vaginal bleeding. What are the symptoms of a rupturing ectopic pregnancy? Abdominal pain and vaginal bleeding. So when she starts experiencing those, she's just going to think, oh, these are the normal symptoms they told me I'm going to experience. And she won't go to the hospital to get
Mm.
care. When she's ruptured an ectopic pregnancy, minutes could mean the difference between life and death for her. And so she's
Yeah.
staying at home and precious time that she should be at the hospital.
Yeah. Absolutely unbelievable. I just for the sake of abortion, it's amazing what, the FDA has done. Like, I just can't even get my mind around it. As an attorney, I think about about this from a legal standpoint, and it's
Oh,
mind-blowing,
totally.
right?
Totally. And not only have they removed the safeguards, but then they buried their heads in the sand and said, we don't want you to tell us about any adverse events other than death.
Oh,
And then they try to claim that it's safe when they're not even collecting the adverse events. So I was excited today. I don't know if anybody was watching the confirmation hearings, but
mm,
RFK in his confirmation hearing said it is unconscionable in the US that we would say we don't want to know data on adverse events related to any drug, including mifepristone. So
yeah.
um, at the very
Good for
least, we
him.
should want to be collecting data on these adverse events so that women can have fully informed consent and accurate information before they take these drugs.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me ask you this, last couple questions here. I'm not a physician. I'm blessed to be an attorney, so maybe I can talk about this on a level that some other folks can't. So many people out there are hearing these lies from their friends and neighbors. Oh, Texas, you're killing women because you protect life at conception. They probably don't even give them that, right? Georgia's killing women because of its abortion law. The women in Louisiana are up a creek, right? How do we, just as the common everyday person, begin to fight some of this? I mean, is it just a matter of education? Like, how do we handle this?
Yeah. Well, I think education is key. I think, saying, well, did you know that in every state in the country, even the ones that have pro-life laws, doctors are free to intervene when a woman is facing a medical emergency or to treat a miscarriage. Not a single doctor has been prosecuted in this country since
Yeah.
these pro life laws went into effect for intervening for a medical emergency or any of these other situations. Texas just released its latest numbers, and since Texas's law went into effect, there's been, I think, over 120 terminations for life of the mother exceptions. And again, not a single doctor has been prosecuted. So I
Yeah.
think we have to keep talking about this. Tell them, hey, do you have friends who live in those states who maybe have been treated for these conditions? You should ask them or talk to a doctor. Um, and I think the other thing is that number of knowing that about 90% of OBGYNs don't perform induced abortions and that these laws are completely consistent with the way the vast majority of OBGYNs have been practicing is really, really important.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think about the fact, and sometimes they've even said this on the sidewalk, that there are answers to real human problems, real ethical answers to real human problems. It doesn't mean that we don't need to really sit with something and maybe even pray over something, right? And I know that you encounter some tough situations in your practice, right? But at the end of the day, these things have been talked about in philosophy and theology and medicine for decades, right?
Mhm.
And what we know is that a miscarriage is not an abortion, that there is an ethical approach to ectopic pregnancy, and it's not an abortion, that we can facilitate an early delivery with many times the hope to save both mother and child, that emergency pregnancy services have been, a part of the practice of obstetrics for decades. And, we can approach these things with the best of ourselves and look to handle them in the best way possible, such that we honor both mother and child. And I
Mhm.
just really hate how the other side tends to pit one against the other. In order for mom to be okay, we always have to, potentially look at hurting baby. But I love how you all consider that you're patient as well and you love them both. You seek to treat them both as human beings, as they are. So it's so beautiful.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, and I think we need to continue to talk about the benefits of pregnancy too. I was
Mm,
talking with a couple of my APLOG colleagues recently that, man, women have got to be scared to death to be pregnant right now because of
mm,
all of this talk about how dangerous pregnancy is. Now, yes, there are things that happen in pregnancy that are dangerous to women when complications happen. It's not the
yeah,
pregnancy that endangers their life, it's the complication. But
yeah.
most pregnancies go really well and carry benefits for mom as well. And so I think we need
Mm.
to continue to celebrate motherhood and celebrate the fact that pregnancy actually carries benefits for women. And we should be talking about that as well.
That's right. It's a natural, beautiful thing. Fertility is not our enemy. In fact, it's a
That's
great
right.
sign of health, and celebrating that, encouraging people to have families and looking at children as a blessing and treating the preborn child as the human being that it is. Oh, what a concept, right?
That's right.
So
That's
good.
right.
Well, you're going to be a featured speaker at the Celebrate Life conference and weekend. Again, I know that so many of the conferences I've been to, you've been at as well, and you get cornered in the hallway. People are always asking you lots of questions. It's so important that Apolog has had a presence at so many of these events. Why are you excited about coming together with like-minded people to further learn and strategize as we mark the Dobbs decision? And why would the common everyday person spend their hard earned money to attend and come hear you and come hear so many people about what they need to do going forward?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the first thing that I would say is just come so that you can be encouraged. I think anytime
Mm,
that I am together with my fellow patriots in this fight that we're in to defend life, it's always so encouraging. And I know you guys have an
yeah.
amazing lineup of speakers on so many different topics. And so, I'll start with the second part first in saying that people really should come to. The Dobbs decision is a huge thing to celebrate. It was something that the pro-life movement worked for 50 years. But
Yeah.
obviously, we know that our job did not end with the Dobbs decision. In fact, our jobs got exponentially harder after the Dobbs
Yeah.
decision. So it's important to celebrate that. But, now we are in this new phase as a pro-life movement where we might need to do things a little differently than we did under the Roe regime, and we need to reach out to people in different ways. We need to combat this medical misinformation that's out there, for example. So I think, even if someone's like, I've been in the pro-life movement for a long time, I kind of know the spiel, I would encourage them to come because, again, I think we need to start doing things a bit differently now, in many ways. The reason why I think it's important that I'm there in particular as a physician is because one, we want to be the medical voice for the pro-life movement in the sense that we want everybody who's involved in this to know that medicine and science is on the side of life. We have
Mm,
great medical backing. We have great medical evidence for our position. And we want everyone in the pro-life movement to be able to give medically accurate information when they're talking about this issue. And so I'm always excited to come to
sounds good.
conferences like this, events like this, to help answer people's medical questions, but also give them hopefully some nuggets and some medical talking points that when they're having those difficult conversations, they can rely upon those as they're defending life.
Yeah, so good. You provide such a service to so many of us. I'm so grateful because it is it's a world out there,
Yeah,
and we're sometimes getting it from left and right. And well-meaning people, even people of again, faith and conscience who just are not informed, they're getting scared. And so,
right, right.
by coming to an event like this and hearing from experts like you, we'll be able to take this information home and combat these lies. And that has a ripple effect that could very well change our state law. In fact, I believe
Absolutely.
it, right?
Yeah.
I know it's disheartening to so many of us that right after Roe versus Wade was overturned, abortion numbers nationwide actually went up. I have a particular theory on that. I actually think, again, it was the abortion lobby coming in and freaking out, and we need to pay for women's abortions, and
Right.
they put out new lines of funding, and worked so hard to funnel women across state lines. We're seeing it as sidewalk advocates as well, and
Sure.
that's a tough thing. I have a theory that it's going to go back down. I'm thrilled that we righted this 50-year wrong, especially legally, as an attorney. It was a terrible decision. The Roe versus Wade decision was a terrible decision. But now we've got some work to do and correcting some of these lies that are out there that are really confusing people and causing them to vote differently, to act differently, and really that is the thing that's putting lives at risk. It's so clear to me. So
100%.
Yeah.
I agree.
Well, Dr. Francis, thank you again so much for everything that you do for us, for so many of us, for the culture, really the nation at large. We're so grateful to AAPLOG for your witness and for speaking the truth about what medicine really is and what it's supposed to be. And again, we're just so grateful. So we're going to be cheering you on as you continue to get in front of Congress or speak on a stage. Thank you again so much for all that you're doing.
Thank you, Lauren, and thank you to all of your sidewalk advocates. You guys really are on the front lines, and we're thankful that you're there as that sort of last line of defense for women. So thank you.
Oh, our great joy. Thank you so much. Thanks for being with us.
Yes.
All right. Well, quick closing thought here. I just really encourage all of us to get educated, right? We don't have to have a PhD in medicine. We don't have to be attorneys, but just enough so that we can combat these lies in the culture. In post-Roe America, we're going to need, all of us who love life, we're going to need to go to that next level and understand what happened in some of these cases where pregnant mothers died so that we can adequately combat this, and then we're going to need to speak up and share it. The Lord needs you. He needs us to dispel the misinformation and clear the way for truth to reign so that more people are encouraged to vote for life, confident that they still have access to quality, life-affirming, life-saving healthcare, which is true for every one of our 50 states that did not change under the Dobbs decision that overturned Roe versus Wade. So I want to encourage all of us to commit to getting educated enough to having intelligent discussions on these fronts and more for the cause of life and family. All right. Well, again, thank you so much for joining me for another episode of the Lauren Musica Show. We'll be back here next Friday at 9 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Central on the Sidewalk Advocates for Life Facebook page, YouTube channel, and then wherever you get podcasts. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great week.